What's going on there, folks? Good evening. It's the Earth Master here on this beautiful Sunday night, end of the weekend. Unfortunately, it is November 13th, 2022, about 8:50 p.m. California time. Along the west coast here, latest earthquake shows a 3.1 into the area of New Zealand, North Island, New Zealand, 200 kilometers deep. Some pretty deep activity ramping up down there. That is coming off of the EMSC. Let me pull up that map here real quick and see if we can bring that up in the New Zealand area. The latest quake there showing up on the map. Looks like a little bit of activity definitely ramping up here around New Zealand. And 3.1, 200 kilometers deep. That's going to be, well, it's not listed up here for some reason. It's not really showing the earthquakes. But it is here on the map about 9 minutes ago. North Island, New Zealand. That is kind of right around the Hikurangi subduction zone, folks. And that is in an area that is kind of primed for earthquake activity. We have seen a tremendous amount of earthquake activity here around the Fiji area, deep and shallow at that. Within this zone over the past 3 to 4 days here, with only minimal, very minimal adjustment here around the Kermadec Trench south into New Zealand. And that includes the Hikurangi subduction zone here that sits just offshore of the Wellington area. You can kind of see that here, the Hikurangi terrace. It's a subduction zone. It's a pretty dangerous area here. It's a plate boundary. And the subduction zones here can get pretty crazy for earthquake movement. Something to watch pretty closely there, folks, in that area of New Zealand. All right, the latest quake here, at least on the map here from the USGS, showing a 5.0 into the eastern area of the Papua New Guinea region. That's a little bit of activity, westward movement. Kind of makes sense there with all the activity we've been seeing in the Fiji Islands area over the past couple days. We did see some activity kind of ramping up after our update earlier this afternoon. A 5.0 into the Mariana Islands area, 323 kilometers deep for that movement. So a lot of pressure being applied here west-northwestward. Now I'd like to show this plate here, or this map, because it kind of shows you the general plate movement here of the Pacific Plate. We've seen all that deeper activity, all that shallow adjustment here around the Fiji Islands area. That's going to be the zone right here, folks. This is where all the activity has been kicking up in that region. And very minimal adjustment down here. We're starting to see a little bit of uptick here around the Papua New Guinea area. And also some deeper movement here into the Mariana Trench region, which only puts further strain up along the subduction area as we see that west-northwestward pressure movement. But at the same time, folks, we've seen months and months of deep activity throughout the Fiji Islands area, Tonga area, with very minimal up here along the Kermadec Trench, and all that pressure movement is headed in that direction right there towards the west-northwest. The Kurokama Trench here has its name up on the board for my top areas to see a possible megaquake. It's only looking likely. The more time, the more earthquake activity that happens around it. It's definitely building up quite a bit of strain there. So we will be watching that zone pretty closely here in the future. There is that earthquake up here into the well, it's at the southern end of the Kurokama Trench that kicked off earlier this morning time frame. Excuse me. Actually, late last night. That's about after midnight. Definitely not my morning time. I'm done with those 24-hour shifts. They're not good. 5.1 at about 37 kilometers deep for that earthquake. But that's about it. Very minimal. This area is very primed for some large-scale activity. It's just a matter of time there. Throughout the China area and the Pakistan area. One earthquake earlier this afternoon time frame of 4.4 in that area of Pakistan. And throughout the region over here, this divergent boundary, separation of the seafloor, going to create a massive movement here of the of the region. Actually, probably going to create a new ocean throughout this area. The Red Sea will soon become the Red Ocean. Well, I don't know if it's going to be named that or not, but either way, that's what's going to happen throughout these plate tectonics over time. Latest quake shows a 4.4 outside of Yemen. Looks like that was coming in almost about 3 o'clock my time frame here. Divergent boundary earthquake up into the Recca-Janes area. This area has been kicking up pretty nicely over the afternoon time frame. Latest quake shows a 4.9 kicking up here into this area. And looks like a little bit of migration there from the Charlie Gibbs fracture zone up north here. This whole area is showing quite a bit of movement. So deep activity on the opposite side of the globe. Stirring something up over here for sure, I believe. It's all connected, folks. It's definitely all connected in one way or the other, whether it's shallow or deep activity there into the Earth region. Definitely got to watch this area of Atlantic. Further down south, Mid-Atlantic Ridge, pretty quiet. Not a whole lot going on across the South Sandwich Trench area, but definitely a noticeable increase up there in the north area of the Atlantic Ocean. One earthquake down here into the Puerto Rico area, 3.1. Very typical zone. South America, what do we got? In the Santiago area, the last earthquake here listed on the map was a 4.2 at about 2 o'clock this afternoon time frame. Really haven't seen too much movement following all that larger magnitude earthquake activity from yesterday. Of course, we had 6.2 and a couple 5s in that area. Really kicking things off there into the Chile region. What do we got here for the states? Oklahoma, Texas. I got one oddball kind of spot over here. I look at this. I just barely glance at it, and I can see, oh, wait a minute. What do we got going on here? Louisiana earthquake? No, that's just odd. We don't see these circles normally pop up here in Louisiana. So I'm like, wait a minute. What do we got out here? But then again, if you look at the map here, and luckily the Google, well, this is used by, what is this here? The Geo, it's called OpenStreetMap that the USGS uses here. A lot of different contributors here. But Longwood oil and gas field, out here in Louisiana. There's a lot. I was out there, what was it, a month or so? Almost 2 months ago now. I didn't go quite far that north. I kind of hovered down here along the coast. Took a trip to the Lake Charles area. Checked out some alligators out here around the region. And some good food out there. If you like the Cajun food, that is your area for it. That's for sure. Stopped in there at Lake Charles. I can't remember the place, but some good food down there. It's been a while since I've been up in the Shreveport area. But there's oil pumping operations all over the place, folks, let me tell you. And it's kind of hard to see amongst the jungle out here. And I call it the jungle because it is. There's trees everywhere throughout Louisiana and eastern portions of Texas. So it's kind of hard to pinpoint on the map here. The topography of the map is kind of hard to read. So you got to look at the cuts amongst the trees out here. And it's hard to tell. It's really hard to tell. But it is out there. Luckily, it's listed for us out here. The oil fields surrounded this earthquake here at 3.0 near the Mooringsport, Louisiana area. It's kind of an unusual earthquake. Over the last 30 days, activity here shows nada. No earthquakes at all over the last 30 days. And I can't really remember the last time I seen some earthquake activity out here in eastern Texas and Louisiana area. It's a little on the odd side. So I kind of look at these earthquakes and think, what's going on out there? U.S. hazard map here. Let me pull this up. Shows the Shreveport, Louisiana area pretty much in the clear. So what's going on? The only thing I can think of is these oil fields out here. Longwood oil field and gas fields all over the place. So it is well away from any major faults, well away from any major plate boundary, and just kind of an unusual earthquake out there around the Mooringsport, Louisiana area. It has been reviewed, and looking at the DigiFeel It reports, it looks like quite a few folks did report feeling this earthquake. Oh, okay, 12. Around the Shreveport and the Mooringsport area of Louisiana. So, a little bit of odd quakeage out there. Rest of the country looks pretty quiet there, at least for the eastern portion. Oklahoma and Texas, as noted earlier, was just a little bit of minor activity. Across the California region, things on the minimal side. Look at Long Valley Supervolcano. Not a whole lot going on. In fact, all across this area, the Garlock Fault structure, pretty quiet. And the Southern California area, pretty quiet as well. Just one earthquake here outside of Banning. 0.8 on the western side here of the plate boundary on the Pacific plate. Pretty quiet activity. Nothing going on through the Pacific Northwest or Yellowstone. But on that note, let's go ahead and check out the Yellowstone activity here around Maple Creek. And there's definitely still some activity kicking up here. These very small spikes, very small microquakes, but nothing major going on across the Yellowstone area. Alaska, about the same. A little spotty activity across the Aleutian Trench. And, man, goodness, a little bit of a quiet spell going on. The Big Island of Hawaii, looks like a lot of activity around the Kilauea volcano. No major changes noted there. And the Mauna Loa area up top, things kind of mellowing out for the most part. Pahala, about the same. 21 earthquakes for the region here. Not that big of a deal. Looks about average. Things kind of on the mellow side. So when we enter into these little phases here of the teeter-totter or lack of teeter-totter obvious events, and when I say that, the teeter-totter event here across the Pacific normally shows activity ramping up here along the western Pacific, while it's quiet over here along the eastern Pacific and adjacent plates, and vice versa. But when there's really nothing going on amongst the two, we see the Atlantic Ocean over here kind of fire up here. So I can't really think of a name for this area when we see that teeter-totter effect go away. But that's kind of what's going on right now. We're putting a pause across the Pacific, getting in across the divergent boundaries here of the Atlantic Ocean, the separation of the seafloor, kind of adding some strange events out here to the map. And with that, just looking at the map here, there is the arrows pointing away from each other. That does put strain over here along the North American plate. So I don't think that has the effect on the movement we're seeing in Louisiana. It's just a little odd, but definitely could be putting pressure up against the Eurasia plate. I mean, it kind of looks like it here from this pressure map and the plate motion in general. So definitely have to watch this pretty closely. We could see things ramp up further north. I did have someone ask me about the polar regions. How come we don't see a lot of activity down at the North Pole, or I should say up at the North Pole, or down at the South Pole? There's not a whole lot of seismic stations down there, unfortunately. And it's these polar regions are kind of like a, well, they're kind of, there's plate boundaries, right? You got the Antarctica plate, but it's kind of in the center of it. It's kind of like the North American plate here. Not a whole lot of earthquake activity happens up here along the center portion of the North American plate. So most of the earthquake activity is consist. There we go. A couple different C words there. You can think of many C words, but consists of earthquake activity around these plate boundaries, each specific plate boundary. So when you get into the middle of them, you don't see a whole lot. Like we don't normally see a whole lot of activity up here in Russia and that's due to the fact that well, it's well away from the plate boundary. There is activity that does take place, the intraplate earthquakes, but for the polar regions, they just there's not a whole lot of activity up there. I'm 100% positive that there's earthquake activity that does take place, but there's not a whole lot of seismograph stations up there. And so we just got to watch for these strange readings across the area on the seismograph. So just going to do a little quick fun here and see what we got for activity. Stand by for just a second here. We're going to do a little bit of drawing down here and just kind of take a look and see what we got here, folks, just for fun across the Antarctica region. Of course, the South Sandwich Trench area obviously gets quite a bit of earthquake activity. But I want to go probably right about, is it going to let me? Yes, it will. So just across a portion of Antarctica down here. I kind of wanted to pull up some earthquake activity since about 1100, but this doesn't really go back that far. The last earthquake down there in Antarctica region looks like a 4.2 back in 2020. So there is earthquakes, definitely. Doesn't look like there's big ones, but they do get some earthquake activity out there across the area. So it's just kind of been a while. It kind of looks like earthquakes occur maybe every 2 to 4 years, and the last earthquake there, 2020. So we could be coming up on maybe some activity that we may note out there. But I'm definitely sure there's a lot more than the 4 pointers that are showing up here on the USGS map. It's very spotty. There's not a whole lot of activity or a whole lot of monitoring systems out there to monitor it. But I do appreciate the comments and the questions out there. I try to answer them if I can. And that was a good one. How come we don't see earthquakes at the polar locations? But we do. They're just not all that active out there in the Antarctica plate. And of course, up north, right? Here's a pretty cool section here of the Antarctica plate. Definitely shows a pretty good view out here with the continent, right smack dab in the middle of that plate. And up to the north, you got to remember, got the North American plate over here, pretty massive plate, the Eurasia plate, and we don't really see a whole lot of activity up here north. But you got to remember Greenland up here, Iceland. This area does see some movement, but just doesn't seem like as much as the other areas. See what we got for the plate movement here. Kind of hard to tell on this map, right? As far as what's going on, I'd have to look at a different view as far as the general plate movement up here, but kind of got that, almost like a counterclockwise direction here of the North American plate. And we'll definitely have to check that out another time and see how that looks. All right, let me see what we got for the tremor map. We kind of skipped over that tonight. 78 epicenters of tremor, southern Oregon and into portions of Washington, right around northwest of Mount St. Helens there. Not a whole lot of movement, but a little bit of uptick, 78 epicenters. The solar weather chart tonight, pretty calm. They've diminished 3140, demoted 3140 from a red status back down to a green, and that is because of the instability here of the sunspots. They're kind of dwindling away, and they're definitely not facing Earth anymore, as you can tell here around the western limb of the sun. But not a whole lot of complex magnetic instability there with those sunspots. I still think we may have a chance of an upper C flare from these massive sunspots, but that's about it. You can have a ginormous sunspot here that takes up half of the area of the sun, but without the instability there, the complex magnetic fields, there's not a whole lot going on. Pretty much a dud. There's one little sunspot here that's kind of making itself known, but I don't think it poses any threat. It is named 3146. I was kind of expecting that. I'm glad they jumped on that. And it doesn't really harbor anything for now. The current solar X-ray chart here shows a little bit of elevated conditions here. Like I said, I still think there's a chance of seeing at least a little bit of upper C flare activity, maybe an M flare. We are getting into that C flare category, kind of crackling here over the last couple hours, so we'll definitely watch that. No major coronal holes, at least facing us. 46 down here is looking pretty massive, but once that rotates into view, I don't think it's going to pose any threat. Maybe a glancing blow. We'll have to check that out, though, in the coming days, in the coming week here. But that's about it, folks. That is about it. So I'm going to jump off here. Have a good night and stay safe out there. And we'll see what the night brings. Almost seems like recently all the earthquake activity wants to happen overnight, about 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, when I'm sleeping. Everyone's sleeping for the most part, except for the opposite side of the world. A little bit of activity coming into New Zealand currently. A couple, I'm not for sure what's going on there. It looks like somewhat of a seismic signature there in New Zealand. I think we need to watch that area pretty closely, though, considering all the major adjustment north of that area. Got to remember deeper activity and the subsequent shallower, larger activity there. It's got to be making some major stress pickup down here. There we go. Looks like a 3.4 coming into New Zealand right now. That's the activity being kicked up here on the map here, on this seismograph station here to the left side of the screen. But I think we got to watch that, folks. New Zealand area. Alrighty, guys. Stay safe. Have a good night. If for some reason something does pop off in the middle of the night and I catch it, whether it's 2 or 3 in the morning, I will definitely jump on. I have been known to do it. But lately it's I try to get sleep. I don't want to be up at 2 or 3 in the morning. But if I do happen to get up to get a drink, use the bathroom, whatever, and I see a major quake out there, no doubt I will jump on here with an update. That's just my commitment and my duty out here to the channel. That's for sure. So stay safe out there, New Zealand area, Kermadec Trench. We will chat you guys a little bit later on. Have a good night, everyone. Peace out.